When Dr. Elias Vance analyzed 85-year-old radio recordings from the Pacific, he expected to debunk another Amelia Earhart conspiracy theory. Instead, his state-of-the-art AI extracted something impossible. Her voice, crystal clear, screaming coordinates that placed her 1,000 miles from where the world had been searching. But Earhart's final words weren't about engine failure or navigation error. They were about something rising from the deepest trench on Earth, something that had been waiting in the abyss for nearly a century. The silence in Dr. Elias Vance's lab was absolute, a manufactured void more profound than any natural quiet. It was a silence measured in decibels and dollars, paid for with triple-paned glass, acoustic foam baffles, and a floating floor that isolated the room from the vibrations of the world outside. This was his sanctuary, a hermetically sealed chamber of pure reason where chaos was not welcome. Inside, the only sound was the soft hum of cooling fans from the server rack that housed the mind of Echo, his creation, his partner, his proprietary artificial intelligence. Vance, a man of 40 with the sharp, weary eyes of someone who spends more time with data than with people, stared at the waveform on his central monitor. It was a jagged, angry thing, a mountain range of noise representing a recording from a hidden microphone at a fundraiser. To the naked ear, it was useless, a cacophony of clinking glasses, ambient music, and the meaningless chatter of 100 overlapping conversations. To Vance, it was a puzzle. His fingers moved with practiced economy across the console, adjusting a multi-band compression filter here, tweaking a parametric equalizer there. He wasn't listening to the noise. He was dissecting it, peeling back its layers like an onion. He isolated the frequency range of the target S voice, a local politician, with a reputation for being Teflon-coated. He fed it to Echo, whose algorithms began a delicate dance, identifying and excising every sound that was not the politician's specific vocal timbre. The waveform on the screen smoothed, the jagged peaks shrinking into gentle hills. Vance leaned forward, his focus narrowing to a single point. He made one final adjustment, a proprietary filter of his own design that targeted the unique reverberations of the banquet hall. He clicked process. The distorted mess resolved into a single, clean audio stream. Vance slid on his studio headphones. The politician S booming, public speech was gone, filtered into oblivion. What remained was a whisper, a ghost that had been hiding in the machine. "The zoning variance is a lock," the voice hissed, slick and confidential. "Just make sure the contribution is routed through the foundation by Friday." A faint smile touched Vance's lips. It wasn't a smile of malice or triumph, but of deep, professional satisfaction. The quiet click of a case being closed. Truth, extracted from noise. It was what he did. It was all he did. In his world, there were no ghosts, no magic, no unsolvable mysteries, only insufficient data or a flawed method of analysis. Every question had an answer, and with the right tools, he could find it. On a secondary monitor, an unread email glowed softly, the subject line waiting patiently. A proposal from the Holloway Foundation for Historical Preservation. He took a sip of cold coffee, the bribe now saved as a secure, verified file, and finally clicked the email. A moment later, his desk chimed as he initiated a video call. The face that appeared on the screen belonged to a man in his 60s, with kind, enthusiastic eyes and an impeccably tailored suit. This was Mr. Chen, the director of the Holloway Foundation, and a patron whose immense wealth was matched only by his passion for history as lost causes. "Dr. Vance, thank you for your time. I trust my message intrigued you." Chen's voice was warm, filled with an energy that felt alien in the sterile environment of the lab. "Your foundationist work is always intriguing, Mr. Chen," Vance replied, his tone polite but reserved. The restoration of the Library of Alexandria's fire-damaged manuscripts was particularly impressive. Chen beamed. "A worthy project, but I am contacting you today about something grander. a mystery that has captured the imagination of the world for nearly a century. I'm talking, Doctor, about the disappearance of Amelia Earhart. Vance fought to keep his expression neutral. Earhart. Of course. The patron saint of conspiracy theorists and amateur historians. He'd lost count of the number of definitive recordings he'd been asked to analyze over the years, each one a sad little forgery or a case of wishful thinking. A fascinating historical event, Vance said carefully. More than fascinating. A wound in the American story, Chen corrected, his reverence clear. Which is why this is so critical. Through a confidential source, my foundation has acquired a complete set of high-frequency radio recordings from a US Navy listening post. Specifically, from the Gilbert Islands, made throughout July of 1937, during the peak of the search and rescue operation. Vance leaned back, a flicker of professional interest finally piercing his skepticism. This was new. Official naval recordings weren't the same as some ham radio operator's dusty attic tapes. The official record states those listening posts recorded nothing but static on the relevant frequencies, Vance stated, the textbook fact coming easily to his lips. The official record, Chen scoffed gently. The official record is often just the story we agree to tell. These tapes have been in private hands, shielded from that official story for 85 years. We have digitized the complete set. We want you, Dr. Yu, and your incredible echo to analyze them, to search for any trace of her final transmission, any clue, no matter how faint. Vance considered it. The technology from 1937 was primitive. The atmospheric interference over the Pacific would have been immense. The chances of a clean signal being captured, let alone surviving on magnetic wire for this long, were infinitesimally small. Mr. Chen, Vance said, choosing his words with care, you should be aware that in 99% of cases like this, the lost messages people hope to find turn out to be misinterpreted static, signal bleed from other broadcasts, or simply hoaxes. The human brain is wired to find patterns in chaos. It's a phenomenon called audio pareidolia. I am not hiring you to find patterns in chaos, Doctor, Chen said, his smile unwavering. I am hiring you to eliminate the chaos and see if a pattern remains. Your reputation is built on finding the empirical truth, no matter how disappointing it may be. That is what I want, the truth. Vance nodded slowly. The job was sound. The pay would be substantial, and if, as he fully expected, he found nothing, he would have professionally and definitively debunked one more piece of folklore. He would be restoring order. Very well, Mr. Chen, Vance said. Send me the data. The next afternoon, a bonded courier delivered a single featureless hard drive. It was heavy in Vance's hand, a cold metal brick that supposedly contained a ghost. He plugged it into the secure intake port of his system. A moment later, the drive's contents populated his screen. It was a vast library, hundreds upon hundreds of audio files, meticulously labeled with dates and times from that fateful July in 1937. He clicked on one at random, NPG Rec 193707022 2300 GMT. He didn't bother with his headphones. He routed the sound to his main studio monitors. A sound like a physical assault erupted into the quiet of the lab, a deafening, crackling, hissing roar. It was the sound of the ocean, the sun, and the empty sky, a wall of pure, unprocessed static that had traveled from a lonely naval outpost almost a century ago. It was the sound of nothing. Vance silenced it. He took a slow sip of his fresh coffee, the bitterness grounding him. He opened the interface for Echo, its clean, minimalist design a stark contrast to the audio chaos it was built to tame. With a few clicks, he created a new project folder, Earhart. He selected all the files from the drive and dragged them into the analysis queue. He set the initial parameters: standard noise reduction profile, signal extraction protocols for degraded human speech, cross-correlation analysis to check for recurring patterns against known broadcast formats of the era. It was all routine, by the book. He looked at the progress bar as Echo began its work. the AI methodically sifting through the first wave of impenetrable noise. Vance felt the familiar, patient confidence of a man who already knew the answer. The machine would run for days, and in the end, it would confirm what he and the rest of the rational world already knew. There was nothing there, just static. Just a ghost story, waiting for a proper burial. Days bled into one another, marked only by the growing mountain of empty coffee cups on Vance's desk and the relentless, unchanging hiss of static from his monitors. The initial confidence, the cool certainty of a professional about to perform a routine debunking, had curdled into a stubborn, grinding frustration. His sanctuary had become a cell, and the ghost of Amelia Earhart was its warden. He had thrown every conventional tool in his arsenal at the recordings. He ran bandpass filters to isolate specific frequency ranges, notch filters to cut out the persistent hum of the 1937 recording equipment, and advanced spectral subtraction algorithms that should have been able to pull a whisper out of a hurricane. Each time the result was the same. On his main screen, a row of completed analysis reports from Echo formed a digital graveyard of failure. Each one bore the same sterile epitaph. Signal decryption failed. Probability of intelligible human speech, 0.01. It was a statistical way of saying, there is nothing here. Garbage in, garbage out, he muttered, rubbing his temples. He paced the length of the small lab, the silence of the room amplifying the roar of the static in his head. Primitive vacuum tube amplifiers, unstable power sources, unshielded wiring they might as well have been recording with a tin can and a string. He was blaming the tools of the past, but the excuse felt hollow. His own multi-million-dollar system, the pinnacle of audio restoration technology, was being defeated. The data wasn't just noisy, it was impenetrable. It was actively hostile to analysis, a perfect wall of randomness that seemed to mock his every attempt to impose order upon it. For the first time in a long time, the lab felt less like a fortress of logic and more like a cage where he was locked in a fight with a formless, unbeatable spectre. The turning point came late on the fourth night, in that liminal hour before dawn, when the rest of the city was asleep. Defeat was not a concept Elias Vance accepted. It was not a variable in his work. Driven by a knot of pride and a burgeoning, obsessive curiosity, he did something he hadn't done in years. He bypassed Echo's clean, user-facing interface and opened a command line terminal, accessing the AIS Core Developer Suite. The screen transformed. The elegant graphs and intuitive controls vanished, replaced by a stark black window filled with cascading lines of dense green code. This was the machine's soul, a place of raw logic and complex machine learning parameters that he himself had written but rarely touched. Here, he could do more than just use the tool. He could change its very nature. His fingers flew across the keyboard. He began to systematically rewrite the primary heuristics of the search algorithm. He wasn't just tweaking settings anymore. He was performing open-heart surgery on the AI. He instructed it to stop looking for a signal within the noise. He told it to abandon the foundational assumption that the static was merely a contaminant to be filtered out. Instead, he posed a radical, almost heretical hypothesis. What if the static itself, in its specific, chaotic pattern, was the carrier wave? What if the message wasn't buried in the noise, but was encoded by it? He was telling his hyperlogical machine to look for meaning in randomness, to chase a ghost in the data where decades of science and common sense said none could exist. It was a scientific gamble of the highest order, a desperate shot in the dark based on nothing more than a stubborn refusal to fail. He hit enter, and the servers in the rack began to hum with a new, intense purpose. Then, there was nothing to do but wait. Exhaustion finally claimed him. Vance slumped in his chair, drifting into a shallow, dreamless sleep. The hum of the servers a monotonous lullaby. He was woken by a sound so soft it almost didn't register a single, clear chime from his computer. It was Echo's notification for a completed task that yielded a positive result. His eyes snapped open. The sun was just beginning to cast a grey light through the lab's single window. On the screen, the long list of failed reports was joined by a new line. The analysis he had initiated hours ago was complete, and next to it sat a single, isolated audio file. Myriad Chi fragment 01.wav. He looked at the probability score. It was still incredibly low, a mere 2.7, but it wasn't less than 0.01. It wasn't zero. His heart began to pound against his ribs, a heavy, frantic rhythm. With a trembling hand, he reached for his headphones, their weight feeling unfamiliar after so long. He slid them over his ears, sealing himself once more within the world of pure sound. He stared at the new file name, his finger hovering over the mouse. He clicked play. The familiar roar of static filled his ears, the sound he had come to hate. It was a dense, hissing sea of white noise. For a second, he thought it was another failure, but then something else. For less than a second, a sound pushed through the static, a sharp, desperate burst of organized energy. It was garbled, distorted, almost completely unintelligible, but there was no mistaking it. It was a voice. It was undeniably a human voice, high-pitched and thin, stretched taut with a panic that transcended time and technology. Vance ripped the headphones from his head, throwing them onto the desk as if they were burning hot. He stared at the monitor, his face pale, his breath caught in his throat. The lab was silent again, but the silence was different now. It had been broken. The impenetrable wall had a crack in it. A single, impossible data point now existed where none should have been. A direct violation of established history. A ghost had just whispered from the machine. The single panicked voice fragment replayed in Vance's mind on an endless loop. A psychic wound that refused to close. The shock had burned away, leaving behind a cold, hard obsession. His lab, once a temple of minimalist order, was now the chaotic den of a man possessed. A graveyard of empty coffee cups surrounded his workstation, and complex equations were scrawled across a whiteboard, a frantic attempt to map the distortion fields of a ghost. He was no longer just the operator of his machine. He had become its co-pilot, its soul. He had the isolated fragment, his impossible piece of data, and he was feeding it back into Echo, not for analysis, but for vivisection. He worked feverishly, his fingers a blur across the keyboard as he wrote entirely new sections of code. He wasn't using Echo's pre-built tools anymore. He was forging new ones. Based on the unique profile of the fragment's magnetic decay and atmospheric distortion, he was building custom de-reverberation algorithms from scratch. He was designing phoneme reconstruction models that could rebuild the shattered pieces of speech, sound by sound. Lines of code flashed across his monitor, a digital incantation to compel the truth to speak its name. He was building a key, a singular, specific key, for a lock that had remained sealed for 85 years. And while his conscious mind was focused on this frantic act of creation, he had set another, equally important process in motion. In the background, Echo's neural networks were performing a different kind of analysis. He had fed the AI every known recording of Amelia Earhart's voice, every broadcast, every interview, every newsreel. The AI was now painstakingly comparing the vocal signature of the mysterious fragment against the established print of the long-lost aviator. On a side monitor, a single progress bar crept forward with agonizing slowness, a silent testament to the millions of calculations happening every second. Beside it, the words glowed patiently, vocal print matching. Before the analysis could complete, a sliver of his old, methodical self surfaced. He needed an outside opinion, a check on his own sanity. He put in a call to the one man whose name was synonymous with the Earhart case, Dr. Marcus Thorne. The face that appeared on his screen was framed by a backdrop of mahogany bookshelves, leather-bound volumes, and walls cluttered with academic awards. It was a stuffy, self-satisfied world away from Vance's sterile lab. Dr. Thorne, the world's foremost Earhart historian, smiled a condescending, academic smile. "Dr. Vance," Thorne began, his voice oozing a kind of bored authority. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Vance cautiously explained his work, omitting his more radical theories. He focused on the data, the discovery of an anomalous voice fragment in the naval recordings. He put the waveform on the screen, the small, sharp spike of organized sound amidst the flat line of static. Thorne barely glanced at it. "Ah, yes," he said, steepling his fingers. "A classic case of audio pareidolia, the brain's desperate attempt to find patterns in random noise, like seeing a face in the clouds or hearing a whisper in the wind. We get these every year, Doctor. Every time someone enhances a recording, they find exactly what they were hoping to find." "This is different," Vance insisted, his grip tightening on his mouse. "The signal profile is anomalous. It is not random noise." "With all due respect," Thorne said, the phrase dripping with disrespect, "you are an audio technician. I am a historian. You understand sound waves. I understand context. And the context here is that Amelia Earhart S-plane went down somewhere near Howland Island due to navigational error and fuel starvation. There were no further credible transmissions. Period." He leaned closer to his camera, his smile tightening. "Take some friendly advice. Drop this. You're a respected man in your field. Don't damage your reputation by going on a digital ghost hunt." The call ended. Vance stared at the blank screen, his face burning. Thorne's dismissal, his smug, unassailable certainty, didn't fill Vance with doubt. It filled him with rage. It was the arrogance of dogma, the belligerent pride of an establishment that preferred a comfortable story to an inconvenient truth. As if summoned by his fury, a soft chime echoed in the lab. He turned. The vocal print analysis was complete. He stared at the screen, his heart hammering. The words glowed in sharp, undeniable text. 97.4. Match. Amelia Earhart. Vindication. Cold, pure, and absolute. He wasn't chasing a ghost. He was chasing her. Stung by Thorne's dismissal and armed with the irrefutable proof of the vocal match, Vance abandoned all caution. He initiated one final processor melting analysis. He linked all of Echo's neural networks, focusing the AI's entire distributed consciousness on the single fragment and the custom algorithms he had built. He pushed the system's power consumption to its absolute limit, diverting all non-essential functions. The lights in the lab flickered. The servers began to whine, a high-pitched cry of a machine being pushed beyond its breaking point, a digital scream of effort. Then, silence. The whine died. The servers powered down to a low hum. The analysis was done. On the screen, a single, fully restored audio file sat in the results folder. The probability score now read 99.8. His hand trembled as he reached for his headphones, the plastic cool against his skin. He placed them over his ears. He clicked play. There was no static. There was only a voice, torn from the throat of history, as clear and as terrifyingly present as if she were standing in the room beside him. "Mayday! Mayday! This is Electra, not an island. Repeat, not an island." Amelia Earhart's voice was sharp with a terror that defied time. "Position, 21 south, 175 west. God, it's..." Her voice broke, a sob catching in her throat. "It's beneath the waves. It's rising." The words were instantly cut off by a horrifying sound, the sharp, piercing shriek of tearing metal. And underneath it, another sound. A deep, resonant, impossibly powerful groan that was not mechanical, not geological, but sickeningly biological. The sound of something immense and alive. Then, pure static. Vance sat frozen, his eyes wide and unseeing. The headphones slid from his grasp, clattering onto the desk. The carefully constructed, rational world he had inhabited his entire life, the world of data, of logic, of solvable puzzles, had just been completely and irrevocably destroyed. Science had given him the answer. and the answer was a monster. The horror of the recording did not fade. It lingered in the sterile air of the lab, a poison that had seeped into the very walls. For a long time, Vance simply sat there, a statue carved from ice, the ghostly groan echoing in the ruin of his orderly mind. Then, slowly, as if moving through deep water, his training took over. His scientific mind, shattered as it was, scrabbled for purchase, for data, for anything that could be quantified and plotted. If he couldn't explain the monster, he could at least map its lair. Looking pale and disheveled, his eyes wide with a sleepless, haunted intensity, he pulled up a projection of a world map on his main screen. The blue and green globe was a comforting sight, a testament to a world he thought he knew. His fingers, trembling slightly, typed in the coordinates from Amelia S' final terrified message, 21S 175W. He hit enter. A single red dot began to blink on the map. It was nowhere near Howland Island, nowhere near the area where the world had been searching for nearly a century. It was over 1,000 miles to the south, in a remote, empty stretch of the Pacific Ocean. He zoomed in, the map resolving into detailed bathymetric contours. The red dot pulsed directly over a deep, dark blue chasm in the seafloor, a violent scar in the planet's crust. The label appeared in stark white letters: Tonga Trench, horizon deep. One of the deepest points on Earth. A cold dread trickled down his spine. He frantically opened new windows, his hands flying across the keyboard, his search terms growing more desperate as he tried to build a rational cage around the impossible. He pulled up geological surveys, oceanic current charts, historical weather patterns. His searches became a frantic prayer to the gods of data. Tonga Trench anomalies, unexplained seismic events 1937, deep sea audio phenomena, and finally, in a whisper, he typed the words he never thought he would search for in a scientific context: sonar ghosts. Armed with the terrible clarity of the recording, Vance went to the only people he thought would listen. He went back to the Holloway Foundation. The meeting was held in a sterile corporate conference room, all glass and brushed steel, a place utterly devoid of imagination. Mr. Chen was there, his face a mixture of hope and anxiety, but he was not alone. Seated around the long table was a board of unimpressed academics, and at their head, looking smug and utterly confident, was Dr. Marcus Thorne. Vance took a deep breath and played the audio. The sound filled the silent room. Amelia S' clear, panicked voice, the shriek of tearing metal, and the deep, sickeningly biological groan. When it ended, a profound silence descended on the room. Mr. Chen's face was ashen. The board members looked stunned, confused. The silence was broken by a short, sharp bark of a laugh from Dr. Thorne. He chuckled, shaking his head as if he'd just heard the punchline to a particularly stupid joke. "Bravo, Dr. Vance," Thorne said, his voice dripping with theatrical sarcasm. "Truly, a masterful piece of fiction. The vocal modulation is a bit overwrought, and the monster noise at the end is a touch cliché, don't you think? Something out of a cheap radio drama. This is not fiction," Vance said, his voice low and tight. "This is the restored signal. The vocal print is a 97% match." Thorne waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, data can be manipulated. Algorithms can be tweaked to produce whatever result the operator desires. What we have here is a sensationalist fraud. A man so desperate to solve a mystery that he has simply invented a solution." He turned to the board members, his expression now one of grave concern. "He came to me with this nonsense before. I warned him. I told him he was chasing ghosts. It is my professional opinion that Dr. Vance has either perpetrated a deliberate and malicious hoax, or he has become utterly delusional." The board members shifted uncomfortably in their seats, their eyes darting from Vance's pale, intense face to Thorne's confident, authoritative one. They were men of tenure and reputation. They chose the safe harbor. Mr. Chen looked at Vance, his eyes full of a deep, crushing disappointment. The dream was dead. An hour later, an email arrived informing Vance that his contract had been terminated, effective immediately. He was discredited, dismissed, and utterly alone. His lab was compromised, his reputation ruined. Vance retreated to the one place left to him, his small, dark apartment. The world of scientific journals and peer-reviewed papers was closed to him now. So he turned to another source of knowledge. His apartment became a cavern of forbidden texts. He was surrounded by dusty books on mythology, folklore, and the occult, the very library of human superstition he had spent his entire life dismissing. He was no longer a scientist in the traditional sense. He was an archaeologist of fear, digging through the forgotten strata of human belief. He scrolled through digitized archives of old sailors' logs from the 19th century, accounts from whaling ships that ventured into the South Pacific. He cross-referenced them with Polynesian oral histories, the passed-down tales of the people who had lived alongside that deep, dark trench for centuries. And patterns began to emerge, frighteningly consistent patterns. Different cultures, different centuries, different languages, all telling the same story. Tales of a sleeping god in the deep, of a chasm that sings on moonless nights, a sound that lured ships to their doom. And most chillingly, multiple accounts of ships that vanished without a trace, on calm seas, under clear skies, dragged down by what the logs called a living shadow. He was outside the world of science now, adrift in a sea of myth. But he was finding echoes. His descent into lore eventually led him to the fringe communities of the internet, the conspiratorial forums he had once scorned. He followed a breadcrumb trail of whispers and redacted documents mentioned on a forum dedicated to unexplained naval incidents. It led him to a declassified military database. Most of it was mundane, but using specific keywords from the old myths, he found a file that had been overlooked. A heavily redacted US Navy submarine patrol report. The vessel was the USS Scorpion. The date was 1968. Their mission? To secretly map the Tonga Trench. Vance's blood ran cold as he read the scanned log entry from the sub-S captain. 1400 hours. Sonar has detected a colossal biological return. Classification impossible. The mass is beyond comprehension. It appears to be dormant. The next entry was from an hour later, 14 from 55 hours. The biological mass is no longer dormant. It is aware of our presence. The final entry was abrupt, the text seemingly typed in a frantic hurry. 15:10 hours. Sonar systems have failed. Evasive maneuvers. God help us. A heavily blacked out section followed. The very next entry was from 24 hours later, reporting total sonar failure and a significant portion of the crew suffering from what the ship's doctor diagnosed as acute, simultaneous mass hysteria. Vance leaned back, his heart pounding. This was it. The missing link. A piece of buried science, a secret kept for over 50 years that validated the folklore. The living shadow from the sailors' logs and the colossal biological return from the Navy's sonar were the same thing. The superstitious myths and the suppressed scientific record were two different languages describing the exact same monster. He wasn't crazy, and Amelia Earhart was not the first to see it. The vindication did not feel like a victory. It felt like a verdict. Staring at the declassified naval report, Vance felt a chilling alignment of worlds, as the whispers of ancient myths were confirmed by the cold, hard data of a military machine. He was no longer a discredited scientist or a lonely outcast chasing ghosts. He was a man burdened with a truth the world was not ready to hear. But they would hear it. He would make them. Working with a grim and steady determination, he began to assemble his weapons. He sat at his laptop in the dead of night, the city lights a distant, ignorant smear outside his window. He created a new, heavily encrypted data package. Into it, he placed the pristine, fully restored audio of Amelia Earhart's final transmission. He added the detailed coordinate analysis plotting her final position directly over the horizon deep. He followed it with his research into Polynesian folklore, the scanned pages of forgotten books, the translations of oral histories, the myths of the living shadow. And finally, he added the crown jewel, the declassified USS Scorpion patrol log. It was a perfect synthesis of superstition and science, a story told in two languages that pointed to the same terrifying conclusion. He composed a new anonymous email. He addressed it not to a university, not to a government agency, but to Ocean X, a famous, maverick deep-sea exploration group, part treasure hunters, part scientists, known for taking on the high-risk projects the establishment wouldn't touch. His fingers hovered over the keyboard as he typed the subject line, a hook designed to be irresistible. The real reason Amelia Earhart vanished. He attached the encrypted file. He took one last look around his small apartment, the last moment of his old life. Then he hit send. The effect was instantaneous and explosive. The world, which had ignored and dismissed him, now could not look away. A rapid-fire montage of chaos bloomed across the globe. News websites, from the most respected outlets to the most rabid blogs, erupted with headlines. The Earhart leak, hoax or history-making discovery. On a 24-hour news channel, Dr. Marcus Thorne appeared, his face red and swollen with fury, jabbing a finger at the camera. "It is a malicious, elaborate hoax," he bellowed, "crafted by a disgruntled fraud to slander the memory of a great aviator." Thousands of miles away, the Ocean X exploration vessel, the Odyssey, a powerful, state-of-the-art ship, plowed through heavy seas, a direct response to Vance's anonymous email. In the ship's briefing room, the hardened crew listened to the leaked audio file, their confident professional faces slowly transforming into masks of awe and creeping fear. And finally, from the stern of the Odyssey, a high-tech deep-sea drone, a sleek, robust machine named Hades, was lowered by a thick cable into the churning, dark blue waters of the South Pacific, beginning its long journey into the abyss. The final act was broadcast to the world. Ocean X, in a stroke of marketing genius, was live-streaming the drone's feed. In the tense, quiet control room of the Odyssey, a dozen technicians and scientists stared at a wall of monitors. And in his dark, empty apartment, Elias Vance watched the same feed on his laptop, a solitary spectator at the end of the world he had set in motion. The camera on the Hades showed the descent through the layers of the ocean. Sunlight vanished, replaced by an impenetrable blackness illuminated only by the drone's powerful lights. The depth gauge on the screen was a ticking clock. 5,000 meters, 8,000 meters. Finally, it passed 10,000 meters. The abyssal plain appeared below, a barren alien landscape of pale, dead sediment, a place never before seen by human eyes. The drone moved forward, its lights cutting a swath through the primordial darkness. Then, the lights glinted off something ahead. It wasn't rock. The texture was wrong. It was ridged and folded, almost like leather. The drone pilot, her voice a tense whisper in the control room, nudged the Hades closer. The drone panned up, following the strange texture. What they had assumed was a low hill on the seafloor was revealed to be something else. It was the gentle, sweeping curve of a closed eyelid. A collective gasp went through the control room. On his laptop, Vance stopped breathing. The drone continued its slow, upward pan, revealing an eyelid the size of a football field. Before anyone could process the scale, before a single scream could escape, the eyelid snapped open. A colossal, bioluminescent blue eye, hundreds of meters wide, filled the screen. It was an eye that held an ancient, malevolent intelligence. It stared directly into the camera, directly at them, directly at the world. And in that instant, the feed dissolved into a blizzard of pure, hissing static. The livestream was dead. Vance stared at the static-filled screen of his laptop, the same sound that had begun his journey now signaling its end. His phone began to buzz incessantly on the table beside him, a flood of notifications from a world suddenly desperate to hear from the man they had scorned. He ignored it. He felt no victory, no triumph, only the soul-crushing weight of a vindication that was heavier than any condemnation. He stood and walked to his window, looking down at the mundane city streets, at the cars, and the people moving through their lives, utterly oblivious to the true, monstrous scale of the world they inhabited. On a television in a nearby electronics store, a news channel had cut to a breaking report. The final shot was of a global oceanic map. Over the South Pacific, a new icon was blinking, a red biohazard symbol flashing directly over the Tonga Trench, and beneath it, a chilling, world-changing line of text scrolled across the screen. Containment zone established, unconfirmed ecological anomaly. The unknown was now known, and it was terrifying. What ends the real purpose of science? Is it to give us comfortable answers, or to lead us to the absolute truth, no matter how terrifying? The story of Dr. Vance really sits with you because it is about that conflict. He begins as our champion of reason, a man who can pull a single provable truth from a sea of noise. But the Amelia Earhart mystery isn't a truth that fits in a neat little box. When the scientific establishment rejects his data, not because it is flawed, but because it is inconvenient, he is forced to turn elsewhere. He starts treating folklore sailors' logs, ancient myths, not as superstition, but as a data set of human experience that has been recording the same terrifying event for centuries. The final reveal from the drone isn't just a monster, is the validation of those old stories. Science doesn't debunk the myth, it just provides the high-resolution photo. It leaves you with a heavy feeling that perhaps the most frightening discoveries aren't the ones that challenge our superstitions, but the ones that confirm our deepest fears. It makes me wonder, what is scarier, living with a ghost story or getting definitive proof that the monster under the bed is real? Let me know your thoughts in the comments.